Hi students, welcome to lesson number 15 on the factors responsible for social mobility and the introduction for the lesson. One of the most studied aspects of social stratification is social mobility, and so far you have seen what mobility means in various societies. And we look at some of the factors that have been identified as impacting social mobility in this lesson. Before we get started, there are a few things to keep in mind. To begin with, no theory of social mobility, since when we talk about factors of social mobility, we are implicitly talking about a theory which can be isolated from a theory of stratification or how society is constructed in general. To put it another way, the study of social mobility is inextricably linked to the study of social placement and recruiting. Secondly, while the following discussion will concentrate on factors that influence social mobility, it should not be viewed as a passive dependent variable. Social mobility or the lack thereof can have far-reaching effects for society and more especially social stratification. And this will be discussed in further depth at the conclusion of the conversation. Finally, there are disagreements among academics about what factors influence social mobility, and this particular lesson will take a look at some of the numerous approaches to mobility that have been used in the past. While social mobility has existed in all cultures, including the most closed societies such as India's caste system, it has been suggested that industrialization has considerably enhanced social mobility rates. And as a result, most mobility research has concentrated on the study of social mobility in industrial societies as well as the factors that influence mobility in those cultures. Sorokin, a Russian sociologist, was a pioneer in the study of social mobility, and according to him, there are some main elements that influence mobility in all cultures as well as secondary factors that are unique to specific societies at specific times. That is, he contends that no culture can be either entirely closed, denying all movement, nor completely open, because there are always barriers to mobility. He identified four key factors, that is, the demographic factor, parental and child talents, erroneous allocation of individuals in social positions, and most crucially, environmental change. The objectives of this lesson is to make the students understand the various factors responsible for social mobility, the demographic factor. The demographic factor is one aspect that impacts mobility in all civilization. It has been noticed that the birth rate of higher groupings is lower than that of lower groups in general. Despite the fact that the lower groups' death rates are higher, the net production rate is such that there is typically some room at the top for lower group members. Perret, for example, discovered that in a particular region of France in 12,000, just 149 noble families remained a century later. In general, he discovered that such lineages only live for 3 to 4 generations. They were eventually superseded by non-noble lines or collateral lineages. Similarly, Alice Inkeles attributed the unusually higher rates of mobility in the Soviet Union in the middle of the 20th century to the loss of lives in the war, which necessitated a high degree of movement. Rapid industrialization is, of course, another essential factor. This is true not only for higher and lower socioeconomic classes, but also for urban and rural communities. Net production rates are frequently higher in the latter. Despite this, urban populations have grown at a considerably faster rate than rural populations. Rather than a natural growth in population, this is mostly due to migration. As a result, old age homes, hospitals, factor and forces of mobility for caring for terminally ill patients and other facilities have sprung up. From the standpoint of mobility, this means that new types of vacancies must be developed and filled. And as a result, While the demographic component has an impact on social mobility, it is not solely a biological phenomena, as social factors in general have an impact on demography. For example, Mendelbaum and others have written about how cultural influences like sun preferences having influenced population structure. Second factor is the talent and ability. Different people have considered talent and ability as qualities that contribute to social mobility in different ways. Soronki points out that in most cases, the abilities of parents and children do not match, and that in ascriptive society, children may not be as well fitted to their inherited status position as their parents. Soronki proposes a number of solutions to this challenge. Individuals may be forced to leave jobs for which they are unqualified due to public pressure. The incumbents may be able to prevent this by resigning. For example, according to Lipset and Bendix, there are constantly new sources of talent that must be absorbed in some way. Even in societies where social standing was inherited, there were always opportunities for brilliant individuals to rise through the ranks. And for Bloch example shows how individuals with military prowess may climb during feudalism's first age. Similarly, Burgell shows out in his study of social stratification that even in the rigorously hierarchical feudal system, there was room for people of low birth, even among the bonded, to aspire to prominence. Closer to home, a jagir was given as a token of gratitude for services provided. And according to Turner, he has labeled this type of movement as sponsored mobility as opposed to contest mobility, despite the fact that these terms were not coined with regard to pre-industrial types of mobility. While absorbing fresh talent may be difficult in communities with ascriptive social structure, even in open societies, it may not be easy. To put it another way, an achievement-oriented society may not be as open as it appears. It could be useful to mention Davis and Moore functionalist theory in this context. In essence, this theory asserts that roles in society are filled based on individual skill and training for various social positions. The differential compensation related to the most critical positions attracts the most capable. And as a result, society is able to employ its best human resources in the most critical roles. And as a result, again, stratification is a tool for social placement and incentive. While this theory has appeal in terms of neatness and tightness, it can and has been subjected to basic critics. In the context of what we are talking about now, namely individual capacities, critics have pointed out that it's foolish to believe that even open societies, much less than the more closed ones, assign individuals to places based on ability. If not, overt forms of inequality such as caste or race, class of origin creates a system in which inequity is passed down from generation to generation. Inequality of opportunities means that even the most capable member of the less fortunate groups will not be able to succeed. Another important factor is according to the elite theory. Wilfred Pareto, one of the elite theorists, argued that talent and competence were the primary reason for people occupying specific position. And he claimed that generations lose their natural qualities with time, or that people from lower social strata may exhibit those qualities, resulting in a shift in the elite personnel. And Pareto said, history is the graveyard of aristocracies. This was his well-known elite circulation theory. In Pareto's idea, there were two forms of circulation. In the first, Talented people from lower social classes rise through the ranks when the skills of higher groups are brought into question. Lower strata groups are more prone to challenge and destroy such groups' supremacy. To put it another way, individual and collective mobility are both feasible. In the context of changes in African chiefdoms, Max Gluckman has referred to this as repetitive change. Of course, it is possible that such a change does not occur within the bounds of a given system, but instead results in the system, that is, the structure of position, being altered. And this is known as a distinction between disputes inside the regime and conflicts over the regime, according to Maurice Duverger. Other factor that influence is the change in the social environment. The changes in the social environment are the most crucial of all the aspects that Soroki considered important. Indirectly, this can affect the demographic element, for example, breakthrough in medicine that extend life expectancy, as well as individual skills, that is, expansion of education opportunities may allow the discovery of talent. As a result, societal change is a fundamental determinant in mobility. Economic, social, political, legal, technical, and other changes all have an impact on social mobility. These macro change processes have an impact on not only mobility but also other areas of societies. And industrialization is one of the major economic shifts that sociologists have failed to recognize as having an impact on social mobility. And another important factor is industrialization and mobility. Much of the mobility theory has focused on the relationship between industrialization and social mobility. One of the most popular theories in this subject attributed to is Lipset and Bendix is that modernization increases mobility above pre-industrial rates, and that once all countries have reached a given level of industrialization, their rates of social mobility are similar. The convergent thesis proposed by Kerr and others states that all industrial societies converge towards a common pattern of mobility, among other factors such as overall stratification patterns. Now, let us discuss first the theory of Lipset and Bendix. They wanted to test two primary assumptions in a famous comparative factors and forces of mobility research of a number of European countries and the United States. First, once a society has reached a certain degree of industrialization, it experiences higher rates of mobility than pre-industrial nations. Secondly, the widespread belief that the United States provides substantially more mobility options than European countries. Their findings supported the first hypothesis but contradicted the second. Lipset and Bendix identify key elements that influence social mobility in industrial economics, and these are changes in the number of available positions. Second, changes in the fertility rates that differ. Third, changes in the order in which occupations are ranked. And the next, the number of inheritable status position changes. And the fifth, modifications to legal constraints affecting possible prospects. Let us understand what are the different factors for that. And the first one are the available vacancies. It is widely acknowledged that as a result of industrialization, the occupational structure shifted from agriculture to industry and then to services. With the move to industry, there is a surge in economic activity as well as rise in the number of job openings in society. And this has been proven in a number of cases. And one aspect of mobility is the migration of people from rural areas to cities to work in new factory positions. And this has both a geographical and a vertical component, as city jobs are typically ranked higher in prestige hierarchies than rural jobs. Other examples are also available, like new white collar positions such as those in the computer field are also created. All of these result in the expansion of number of available vacancies, and in this way then industrialization act as a major factor generating social mobility. Another factor is legal restriction. Changes in the political and legal environment can also help people move up the social ladder. In India, the traditional caste system assigned people to traditional vocations, and certain occupations such as learned occupations were either legally or customarily restricted to low caste people. The concept of all citizens having equal rights under the law, as well as the democratization of political institutions, abolished barriers to social mobility. At the same time, policies such as universal suffrage, Panchayati Raj, and others allowed those who had previously been denied political rights to participate in politics. Another important factor is the rank and position. If the ranking of a position changes, mobility can occur without any change in the individual's position. For example, one study in the United States found that government posts gained in prestige in the 1950s compared to the 1920s. As a result, government employees have been able to advance in their careers without changing employment. Of course, this could also lead to downward mobility. Some vocations would become less significant in society and economy as a result of the re-ranking, and persons in those positions would be downgraded. Another factor is the convergence hypothesis. The convergence hypothesis is a well-known and highly discussed hypothesis about the relationship between industrialization and stratification. Kerr and others put it well when they said that in today's world, industrialization was a common factor that would drive all industrialized societies toward a common future society, which they dubbed a pluralistic industrial society. These cultures would have similar stratification patterns as well as mobility trends. The industrialization would demand the open and simple movement of people from one position to another. Therefore, mobility would be high. In some ways, this was a functionless argument. They also implied that mobility rates would continue to rise in the future. Goldthorpe presents an extensive critique of Kerr and others' argument. He references Miller's work, which reveals that there is a lack of convergence between the rates of migration of industrial civilizations, despite the fact that Miller used more data than Lipset and Bendix. This suggests that other elements such as cultural influence, the educational system and so on may have an impact on social mobility in addition to industrialization. Goldthorpe himself believes that the major differences between socialism and capitalist societies, which Kerr and company place under the heading of political and ideological differences, are political and ideological differences. Although there is a superficial similarity between Kerr's thesis and Lipset and Bendix, the latter's reasoning, as previously mentioned, merely argues that after a certain level of industrialization, mobility rates climb. A continual increase as well as a convergence are not expected. It's worth noting that Soroki did not foresee a steady increase in mobility rates through time, nor did the predictor decline. He did feel, however, that neither industrialized nor pre-industrial civilizations are fully closed. If he believed anything, he stuck to a cyclical perspective of mobility rates which would rise and fall. Now, what is downward mobility? So far, we have only been looking at how various kinds of changes have enabled people to become upwardly mobile. However, this is defined. The same argument has another side as well. Just as industrialization is seen as increasing rates of upward mobility, it also brings about a great deal of downward mobility. And the factors and forces of mobility downward mobility can occur because certain occupations have lost in prestige through a re-ranking of positions, and thus their occupants have moved down. In a number of cases, however, it may not merely be a case of demotion, but rather then those very positions cease to exist. So, this would be a case of structural downward mobility rather than circulation or downward mobility. If such terms can be used, for example, the coming of polyester and other synthetic fabrics in India has drastically reduced the demand for cotton. Coupled with a fall in global demand for Indian short staple cotton, many cotton farmers in India have had to face ruin. Some have turned to other crops, others to other occupations, and some have even committed suicide. So, with the coming of modern households, gadgets, for example, traditional occupations such as the washing of clothes can no longer employ so many people. What is of concern is not so much the loss of traditional jobs, which may have been quite demeaning to human dignity, as in the case of the tasks perforated by the lower caste in India, as that if no alternative sources of livelihood are offered, large sections of people may sink deeper into poverty. Unemployment, therefore, is a consequence or aspect of downward mobility. Now, the subjective factors for mobility. The preceding sections we focused on the numerous objective elements that influence social mobility from diverse viewpoints. Now, let us take a look at the subjective elements or the things that people want to be mobile. Obviously, we are talking about goals for upward mobility here. Of course, in many circumstances, mobility occurs involuntarily, as it does in the case of reclassification of jobs. But however, given person in identical situations, what motivates one to pursue mobility while others does not? Now, let us look therefore at some of the subjective factors of social mobility. So, individuals are more likely to be upwardly mobile than downwardly mobile. We may fairly infer the theory, factor and forces of mobility of the leisure class by Thorsten Veblen, who permits us to deduce that every stratification structure is inherently a source of mobility. This is because everyone's opinion of themselves is heavily influenced by what others think of them. So, individuals on the other hand will always strive to be well linked by their peers, and as a result they will aspire to positions the society considers valuable. And the process of Sanskritization demonstrates how a devotion to the caste system principle is a source of aspiration for upward mobility. However, as Bentley points out, while upwardly aspiring groups seek to join the higher groups, once there, they try to maintain their exclusivity. As a result, both processes of inclusion and exclusion coexist paradoxically in the caste system. This concept is comparable to Weber's concept of social closure, but returning to the main point, we may say that wherever there are value systems, dedication to those values will naturally provide motives for mobility. And Merton also written about the importance of social behavior being determined by the reference group. And he also claims that the person who wants to be mobile as a non-membership group as a reference group rather than his own. And as a result, the norms he adopts are deviant in the perspective of his own group. He calls this process as anticipatory socialization. So, individuals who are on the peripheral of their social groups for a variety of reasons may be subjected to this type of anticipatory socialization. And the process of Sanskritization, in which a caste adopts the lifestyle and habits of a higher caste and aspires to be recognized as higher in the hierarchy through time, might be used as an example. To summarize, this discussion attempted to provide some of the most important macrostructural as well as subjective aspects that influence social mobility. And at the same time, we try to look at the elements that cause social mobility with a critical point. It has also been attempted to present different points of view in order for students to rebuild their own critical faculties. And for students who want to learn more, a short reading list is also being offered. Unfortunately, there isn't nearly as much empirical research in mobility in India as there is in the industrial world. Thank you.